exploration, I want to explore the idea that the grief, loneliness, and trauma, and essentially the matrix of mental emotional disease is actually a relatively accurate perception of what is outside of us and what is being unhealthily processed by us as individuals, but in fact is a mirror of what's going on around us, and that we're standing here looking at a mirror and seeing a sickness in ourselves that is actually the reflection of what's going on in the world outside. To do this, let's look part by part at what I would call the dark matrix that has been built mentally, physically, and emotionally between us and ourselves. The first part of this matrix is chauvinism. So what chauvinism does is, in the division of ourselves between masculine and feminine, is it devalues the feminine, the listener, the student, the vulnerable, the emotional, the spontaneous, the joy, the innocent, the wonder and awe is systematically denigrated and violated by the culture. And the shrewdness, the power over, the action, the speaker, the teacher, the material, the mental, is exonerated and promoted supposedly, like we supposedly say this is for our family, for our children. But in so many cases, the way that work and money is set up takes us further and further away from ourselves and our relationships rather than providing for them. As a contractor, I watch this with my clients in a variety of ways. Just to give you a very small window into that, one of my clients, an advertising woman with a very depressed husband, contacted me for a large home and landscape remodel. And her husband wanted peace and quiet and felt depressed, but he was ashamed of his depression, and so he discounted it. It's an emotion. And he thought he and his feelings were the problem, and that despite the fact that it made him miserable, this renovation project should proceed. And she thought the same thing. he'll get through this. You know, we've had lots of upheaval and change in our life, and this is not ideal for him, but he'll get through this. What we really need is a complete renovation of a perfectly nice house. I mean, to begin with, this is, you know, one of the nicer homes in the world. But let's discount the feelings. Let's not spend this on a family vacation or on deep bonding. Let's not do anything to respond to the feelings. Let's ignore the feelings and push on to have a cooler, a nicer house, a nicer garden. And I discouraged this. And they said, oh, that's very sweet of you, but we all know that, you know, we've got to improve ourselves, i.e., we've got to ignore our feelings, and we've got to improve our material possessions, which it's even hard to say it's improvement to spend well over $100,000 on changing things that are perfectly adequate just to be more modern. So this is modern ideas serving themselves, i.e., we should be more modern. So we're going to damage our marriage and damage our emotions further so that we can be more modern. Why? Why be more modern? Well, supposedly being more modern is the right thing to do. Why? You know, does it really make you feel happy if what you're saying is it's depressing? So it's this kind of blind spot that we have in this culture that we'll see clients saying, oh, I couldn't sit home today and enjoy looking at a pine tree and just feeling the peace and joy of that. No, I've got to go out and work hard so that I can put in a new driveway. What's wrong with the old driveway? Well, it looks so ugly, and you know, they've got a new technique out there, and so I've got to work really hard and put in a new driveway. And the issue is not that a new driveway is bad. The issue is that when emotions and everything feminine in men and women are denied to such a degree that they become way out of balance, we actually create suffering inside ourselves by perpetuating the imbalance. So the first part of this prison is the devalued, the shamed, the dismissed feminine in both men and women. The biggest expression of this in America is the absurd heart-work balance. I'll tell you another example of that. I had a girlfriend that she had chronic fatigue from so much stress trying to please. She'd just been so shamed by her parents around being completely worthless. She was a beautiful emotional being. But she'd been so shamed that her whole life goal was to prove that she was as masculine as the toughest man. Now, thankfully, she wasn't, or I wouldn't have been attracted to her. But this was her goal, drummed into her by the shame of her parents. So when she had chronic fatigue, when she could easily have gotten a less stressful job that she enjoyed and taken more hours off to play with her dog, which she loved. No. What she did was she pushed for a promotion that left her traveling in a way that was stressful. And she exhausted herself, all so that she could prove that she could advance in this pharmaceutical company, which she could, and which she did. And she drove herself into absolute hell. But her mind, which she valued more than her feelings from cultural programming, left her feeling like she was making progress, while her body and her emotions went downhill. She then borrowed my emotions to support this unhealthy trend, meaning she's making her body and her heart sicker every day. She's taking on this new promotion. She's not making more money because she's having to spend all the excess in salary coping with medical bills and all that around the stress. And her mind is saying, see, I can do it. I'm not a loser. Responding to the shame, which is nothing shameful to begin with. Meaning her parents had shamed her for being so emotional, as good American parents often do. And so she was going downhill physically and emotionally, staying the same financially because she was spending so much money repairing that. And then she wanted to borrow my energy and emotion to sustain it. And she'd say, thank goodness you're there, Dane, because it's the only, my few hours with you a week and the few hours that I have available, these are the only happy times. And I've just got to get through this. I've got to do more. I've got to prove that I can do this. And I said, no, you don't. You don't have to prove it. But not only that, you are taking more and more from me to go in a direction that is not good for your well-being. And I'm not going to be used for that because you're not showing up for me and my feelings. You're choosing to denigrate the thing that I like the most. You're slapping slime all over your body, all over your heart, and you don't care because you're proving that you could make it. And the question is, how on earth did she get so sick mentally where she thought this was progress? And it is the chauvinism that is so deeply ingrained that she couldn't even question it. And so I left to find, very hard in America, a woman that would put her emotions and body first. And she went downhill, all the while proud that she could prove it. And I think she'd go to her grave, happily dying, with her boss saying, you've made the cut. i.e., you've worked 60, 70 hours a week, like any slave man who's dissociated from his feelings and whatever. And we're not going to even ask how you feel because that doesn't matter. And her environment and coworkers who were not honest and backstabbing around her emotions would leave her crying because she actually felt things. But she couldn't do anything about that because that would show that she was weak, because she still had feelings. And so this is chauvinism and the work-life balance structure, which, if you look at our tribal ancestors around the world, is a miserable life, meaning her quality of life and many of our quality of lives is lower than a hunter-gatherer is lower than many farmers' lives a few hundred years ago, not measured by granite countertops, not measured by Mercedes, but measured by the amount of hours required doing stuff that we don't want to do in order to possess things that do not bring us happiness at a level required to offset spending 60 to 80% of our energy pursuing stuff we don't necessarily believe in or want or need, but have been so conditioned to pursue, and that it's not attuned to our body or our feelings or our well-being. That the jobs are not oriented around us, they are oriented around the idea of production. Now, I'm a company owner, and I can make a lot of money, and there's absolutely no question that having fewer employees working more hours, particularly with grunt-type job descriptions, is better for company profits. It is not better for the workers living in those situations. And that doesn't matter in our country. And then there's the aspiration, well, maybe one day I'll be a company owner or I'll be an executive. But by definition, that condemns a majority, because there will never be a majority, in a company with 5,000 people. It's not like there's going to be 4,000 owners and 4,000 executives and 1,000 people doing grunt work, working long hours. No. There's one owner, two owners, three owners. There's 5% executives, and 95% become slaves willingly with the idea that they will beat 95% odds and be an executive. And that this is good. That being a slave owner rather than a slave is somehow better. And I'm not talking black and white, because some people really do enjoy their work. But I think many people are conditioned to enjoy being valued and valuable in a world that shames people who are not more productive, rather than questioning what's the point and what generates quality of life. I spent time, just deviating briefly for contrast, I spent time recently with a family on Palau, an island in the Philippines, where their entire house took 1 week and $100 to construct with bamboo. And they lived their life working maybe 10-20% of the time, 10%, and they spent 80% of their time with their family in comfortable, relaxed bonding in an environment that is a higher quality of life than any of my millionaire clients have, that I can ascertain. This family had higher air quality, higher weather quality, higher natural beauty, better food, pure water, no pollution and noise pollution, no crime. And they're out in the forest in an environment that anyone could replicate, but has been hoodwinked into this idea of production is value and status is valuable, so they're not even attempting it. And yet this family of supposedly third world living had a higher quality of life in any material metric of, like their physical environment. It wasn't polluted with TV. And they were in more harmony. There were 10 of them living in a relatively simple bamboo hut. The children were happy and peaceful and obedient. They were respectful because there was no violence. So they were a happy, unified family. Nor were they discontented. They had not been educated enough by Western ideas to feel that they ought to be ashamed of themselves for living such a happy life. They lived such a happy life emotionally and physically because they had not been educated that this was in fact shameful. I believe that many average Americans' life quality would go up significantly, that their experience of well-being would go up significantly if they traded places with this Philippine family, and that this Philippine family's family well-being, emotional well-being, and physical well-being would go down, and that it would take a significant amount of hammered-in Western education for them to believe that it would go up trading places. But that if you actually measured their bodies and stress hormones and minutes of the day when they felt joy, they would be going down. Now, we all know that this isn't important, that they're just too dumb. We know. How is hard to imagine, but we know that they're just too dumb to realize what they're missing out on. That compulsively eating, compulsively distracting themselves, watching largely meaningless media, arguing about politics, driving around with high debt, trying to make ends meet. We all know that that's progress. They apparently have not gotten the message. Poor things. Or have we been hoodwinked from enjoying a reality in which our bodies, hearts, and minds are significantly more happier in technical metrics, looking at heart rate, looking at the amount, the balance of negative emotion versus positive emotion. And I'm very interested in this because having climbed the ladder of goals and accomplishment, etc., I've watched my happiness go down. I would say that I'm less happy with the dream lifestyle. The dream lifestyle meaning traveling, owning a company, all this stuff, achieving all my goals, than these people. And it's because of the lie that close, bonded, quality, peaceful time without trauma and distraction is less important than all of that and has been sacrificed. And we do have, each of us, 24 hours in the day, and we do freely sign up for the life that we live. And yet, when we're brainwashed with shame, we can end up choosing to pursue goals in a lifestyle that is actually less conducive to deep bonding and meaningful relationships and reflection, even if we say we want it, the reality is that this family of 10 had it better than I do. In my 5-star hotels with 300 staff rushing around, none of whom know me intimately the way this family knows itself. So the lie that production of things just makes all of that irrelevant, or that the production of money or the production of power somehow makes my life more important than their life. I don't agree. I think their life is just as important as my life, and their well-being is higher. And that's my life. When I look at people who are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, who are in debt, who are rushing around constantly, doing stuff they never dreamed like this would be my dream job, and they feel inadequate, and they're stressed out about this and that, and they're feeling they're letting their children down, and their children aren't spending as much time as them as they'd like, and they're preparing their children for the same lifestyle. It's so depressing. So in other words, I think the depression is real and needs to be given back to the culture that is depressing, as opposed to the next part of the lie, of course, is it's all about you. It's not about a sick culture. It's about you. So you have all this pressure on you, the individual. So this is the next part, I think, that actually is depressing. And the feelings of depression are just saying something's off here. It's depressing to be marginalized in supposed democracies, but just to give you an example of the gap between the supposition of democracy and actual democracy. Like, I'm building a house, and my county, Marin County, California, tells me it'll cost $30,000 in 3 years to get a permit to build the house they want me to build, which will cost $450,000 to get the square footage to do the things that I want to do in the space. But I have to build it their way on so many levels. I have to shape it their way. I have to put the windows in their way. I have to over-engineer it their way. The easy way that I came up with building it, they don't like the look. Is it a democracy? I asked all my neighbors, how do you feel? I think this would be a good fit for the neighborhood. All the neighbors said this would be great. The county says, we represent the best interest of the people, and we're going to tell you how to build it. And I said, well, all my neighbors like this idea. And they say, we don't care. This is our regional building policy. It's not technical building codes. It's like, we don't want you to have roofs like this. Why? Technically, the engineer says it's great. Well, we don't like that look in our county. Well, who are you? My neighbors said it's great. I think it's great. Can I build my own house? No, you can't. You can build our house, and it's going to add 30, 40% to the cost. And then you can over-engineer it more than the earthquake specs are, because that's just our policy. So rather than a $100 house, I'm pushed from a $200,000 house to a $400,000 house I don't want. And then I'm supposed to be a slave to build all that, or just give up on having my own house in my own town. So this is the way, so it's not democratic. My vote and my neighbor's vote don't count at all. Now, is this depressing? Or is this about me? I think it is depressing. I think it's depressing that we, in my case, an American, cannot build my own house and have to waste $30,000 having people tell me I can't. Meanwhile, my counterparts on Palau, they didn't get a permit for their $100 bamboo house, which is closer in comfort and environment than my house at $450,000 is or would be. I like their house. If I could live on my land today with a bamboo house like that, I would have done it last year. It is so depressing to, and it's not just this. It's not just the $30,000 in permits. They want $20,000 they want an environmental study on a 60 by 200 foot lot that anyone can go out and look at and just say, yeah, this is the environment. All their overbuilding and stuff will hurt the environment. A bamboo hut wouldn't. The land's going to sit there as it is, but they want a $10,000 environmental study. Does it really take $10,000 to look at a piece of land right in front of you and make a judgment call that it will have just about the same impact as all the houses next to it? In my county, yes. Is that depressing? Yes. Then the county said, you can have some of our right-of-way. We don't want it because it's in, if we have to take care of this lot and we don't want it and stuff. So I said, okay, give me the right-of-way, fine. They say, well, we'll give you a right-of-way, but you've got to go hire this expert. You've got to hire a surveyor plus an expert, plus you have to pay us a fee to process the permit. How much is the fee? $4,200. And what's the expert going to verify? They're going to verify that none of our utilities are in this part of the right-of-way. I said, how's the expert going to verify that? They're going to look through our records. So you don't want to look through your own records. You want me to hire an expert to look through your records for you. What was that $30,000 for? Oh, that's for other things. So my point is, this is a depressing, unfriendly environment that is not democratic, it's bureaucratic. And I'm supposed to stuff it in and smile as I waste money that could build 10,000 bamboo huts in a lovely village and have lots of children playing in it and having fun. And I'm going to call this progress. Look at how sophisticated I am. That I've got this over-engineered monstrosity that I've been dictated to, and I'm going to call it my house. It's not my house. It's your house. It's your procedure. It's your over ridiculous engineering things. It's your protocol. It's your schedule, and it's my inconvenience. Doesn't make any sense. So my point is that there are a great number of inconveniences just to operate my business. I need a bookkeeper, I need a tax preparer, I need to pay a city license, I need to pay I need to get the state license. I need to pay regular fees for all of this. Then I get all these tax bills for and I get very little for all of that effort. And it's not, and it doesn't encourage leisure time. Now I've figured out ways around it, and I'm taking my money out of the country to spend more time in Philippines, for example, because it's so lovely being next to the water, listening to the waves in a little bamboo hut. It's wonderful. So my point is simply that there have been many peoples around the world and throughout history who have more freedom to have a higher quality of life, and it's not hard. But we've made it excessively hard, and we're calling it progress, and I'm calling it a depressing confinement. And it's there's many areas where the disconnect of what we have to do has nothing to do with what makes us happy, has very little to do with well-being, but we have to do it. Why? Because we have to support the democracy, not the democracy supporting us. And that's just not fun. We have to be professional. So going back to that chauvinism thing, if I smile a lot and am warm and have a nice sense of humor and stuff, I've noticed my clients want to pay me less because I'm being unprofessional. I'll tell you the way to make a lot of money as a contractor. You be on time, you dress a certain way, you act serious, you maintain this very cool protocol, you calculate everything, and you pretend that this is all perfectly normal human behavior, and you let the clients apologize anytime they have feelings or any personal quirk, rather than enjoy themselves. And they will pay you a lot of money to do what the neighbors did, which is, it's a great recipe for making a lot of money. I've made all of my money doing that, because that's what people have been led to believe is top-notch professional contracting. And they're so pleased, like you got the job done on time, it cost the exact hundreds of thousands you said it would, you did exactly what you said, and it fits in with the neighborhood, and I'm working like hell as a slave to pay for it all, but that's just the way life is. Thank you so much for being our contractor. Well, it doesn't make any sense to me. You're working like a slave to pay me lots of money to fit in with the culture. You're not particularly happy. I'd be much happier playing around. Why not play with your kids? Why not do some fun things? In fact, why don't you not do this contracting job at all and come to Thailand with me, where we could have a lot more fun per dollar than this whole contracting process? Oh, that would be so nice. Well, then do it. Well, we can't do that. We've got our jobs. We've got this. We've got that. It wouldn't be the American way. In other words, we're a slave to this idea rather than letting ideas and our time and our money bring maximum well-being. So I would say that the ideas that these are progress, that progress is automatically good, and that it's up to us. And if we don't like it, something's wrong with you. It's like, you're weird. You want to have a bamboo hut? Oh, wow, gosh. Well, weirdos like you, we've got to get rid of you. I mean, on what basis? Well, it's not normal. Well, what is normal? If we do a survey of 100 people in the wealthiest county in the United States, that's my county, how many people are depressed? How many people are lonely? How many people have really strong friendships that their mind is not just saying, oh, this was a great networking event, but that those people actually know how they feel? Out of 100 people, the well-being ratio of health and all that is not very good. But their minds are telling them they're doing great because they're at the top. And they'll be able to sell their newly remodeled home for a small profit and blah, blah, blah. And well, what are you going to do with that? I'm going to buy a bigger home, and then I'm going to do the same thing with that, with the same lousy permits and all that. And this is fun? More fun than knowing your family well? Oh yeah, it's great. This is the way we got to do it. So I would say that most Western education is not very fun for a good percentage of the people, but that's the student's fault. Most teaching jobs are not very fun, but that's the lousy teachers or the school system and their fault. It's never the system's fault. It's always the people's fault. It's not balanced, because you take those same people and you give them a nice set of bamboo huts, and after you've retrained the minds to dismiss this as being a loser and actually enjoy the environment, suddenly you realize this is great. Like, I meet Westerners living in Thailand and the Philippines all the time, and they can't stand the idea of going back. So much quieter, so much less stress, so much more peaceful. They're making way less money than they would in their home countries, and they're much happier, and they refuse to go back. That's the reality. But then people in the West are just being beaten on over and over again. And then there's no time to self-reflect on all these feelings and stuff, because people are working so much. So that's part of the curse. Then there's the dogma of science. Now, this is a really interesting thing I've been learning about, and thanks to Rupert Sheldrake for his scientific analysis of science. So science has not proved that there is not life after death, that consciousness is not bigger than the body, that materialism is not the only thing that exists. However, science has unscientifically made this pronouncement. So it has scientifically proven the way atoms move, the way this and that, but they've gone beyond that to be dismissive of consciousness and spiritual experiences, to a point where just about everyone in the West treats science as the ultimate arbiter of their life experience, not themselves, and is largely embarrassed. Whether it's people who are religious and happen to enjoy their religion, it's not just more and more people believe in science more than themselves, and believe that scientists know what's best. But scientists are fanatical dogmatists in many cases. Many leading scientists who've prepared the theories are going way beyond what science can prove on an act of faith that science will be able in the future to prove everything scientifically, and that will be consistent with all the past science. Like we scientifically know about 5% of reality because there just haven't been enough years in laboratories. Now, because everything that we do know in that 5% shows consistency with the scientific theory, scientists go on an act of faith to go out and predict that the other 95% of reality will all be proved scientifically someday, therefore anything else doesn't exist. Well, this is an act of faith in materialism. And this is used to shame and diminish anyone with sacred and spiritual experiences, which is depressing, given that that's one of the most meaningful areas of human existence. And they're being denigrated, humiliated, and dismissed by people that cannot even adhere to their own dogma of science to prove the basis of the dismissal before dismissing them. They are acting on an act of faith that nothing beyond material things do exist, and we're having an experience and an act of faith that something beyond the body does exist, and we're being told that we're the idiots, rather than, hey, there's two acts of faith going on here, since you have no scientific proof that I didn't have these experiences. But you aren't being scientific about your own science. So that's miserable. It's also confusing. Then you have Christianity and several of the other dogmatic religions, which say this is the only way. You have to believe this, this, and this, which is not entirely logical and goes against, in some cases, known science. Like I'm all for the science that is proved scientifically. Great. That's the best theory for the data, and it has been verified scientifically. That bit should be validated. So they've got about 5% of known phenomena has been rigorously gone through scientific method, 5% of reality. And so the rest is just being assumed that it's all is scientific because 5% was assumed to be. And that's like taking Alaska, 5% of the globe or whatever, seeing it full of snow and saying, well, we know Alaska's full of snow. We haven't gotten around to measuring the rest of the world and looking at that, but we're sure it's full of snow too. It's like, no. The world changes depending on where you are on it, and it is not logical to automatically, dogmatically say that everything is scientific because this is, that every part has snow because Alaska does. No. It's probable that there are many things that we do not yet know yet, and that science, being only 200 years old in a 100 million year history, has lots to learn about itself and the world and what it cannot show and prove. So that's another thing. And then we have our religion, which which just monopolizes all spiritual experience. So people have had beautiful spiritual experiences throughout history, and then the religion of the day, Christianity, says, no, it's all us, or it's nothing, or it's the devil. It's us or the devil. And you're going to burn in hell in all eternity by our loving God if you don't go along with our idea. So better sign up because eternity is a long time to live in a pit of fire. So we have, and then our greatest epitaph of our version of the Almighty is a man who was all powerful, but he sent his only child down to be nailed to a cross for the sins of the people that they made. So it's like what a miserable story. I'm an all-powerful being. Let's see. Let's create people in my image. So sinners are my image. So let's create a bunch of sinners like me, because I'm a sinner, because I burn people at the stake and do all this stuff. So I'm going to create a whole, and I know they're going to lie and sin and all that because I created them and I'm an all-knowing. So I'm all-powerful and I'm all-knowing. So I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm creating sinners who are going to go in this garden, do what I tell them not to. I know it because I know everything. I'm all-powerful and I could stop them, or I could even talk to them. I could say, hey, remember I told you bad things will happen here? I can see you're walking in that direction. What's drawing you to that bad possibility? Why not? Let's talk about it. No. I'm going to let them make the fatal mistake, condemn the entire humanity to suffering, and then millions of years later, I'll have another child, my only child, of course a boy, thanks to chauvinism. Then I already know what he's going to do because I'm all-knowing. So I'm going to send him down, or I'm going to let him choose to go down and get nailed to a cross. And then I'll forgive the people who do everything I tell them to do, including love the parents. And I'm going to ignore psychology, and I'm going to ignore the fact that you can't order anyone to feel anything. Love thy parents is a commandment. Love is natural when parents are kind and respectful and all that. And hate is natural when parents torture you and traumatize you and lie to you and are not there and betray you and torture you some more and then tell you it's all your fault. So hate is natural there, but I'm going to command them to do what is not natural, which is love these miserable excuses for parents. Otherwise, they're going to go to a lake of fire. That'll really teach them. So this is the religious backdrop that we pay lip service to. That's depressing. So even if you do believe in all this, Christianity in its entirety, be devoted to it. Don't steal and have sex with your neighbors and cheat on your wife and all that, and at least show some respect. Oh, no. We're all going to believe in this miserable God who punishes everyone and all this, and then we're going to do it anyway. We're going to lie, steal, cheat on our taxes, have sex with a neighbor, and and do this and that and the other, and then we're going to have militaries go and invade other countries to preserve the American way, and we're just going to ignore the fact that we're killing people under public auspices. That's fine, even though we're a Christian country. We're just going to kill people because the 10th commandment doesn't count when the government tells you to kill people. It only counts when you decide you're really upset at the government for ruining your life and you want to kill a government official. Oh, that's breaking the 10th commandment. But you want to go off to Vietnam and napalm children, that's fine. That's sanctioned. How? Well, we don't go into that. So there's insanity. It's a miserable reality. And you're not supposed to question any of this. You're not supposed to question. You're not supposed to rebel. You're supposed to go along with it. Now, I think this is pretty horrendous. Religious backdrop, pretty horrendous. Bureaucratic backdrop, pretty horrendous. Work backdrop, horrendous for the majority of people. And the whole narrative that if you grab and are smart and are shrewd and are sociopathic and you get to the top and you can lord it over other people or whatever and be rich, that then you're happy. Why would you be happy in that environment, looking at the majority of your fellow citizens who are working like mad, having broken families with 50% divorce rates, which is another integrity thing, like I'll be with you for life half the time, and then many of the people who are married aren't very happy, and we're just going to keep chugging along. And then suicide rates are high because there's so much misery. This is not a happy culture. We have about 2% of people in prison and or on parole. We have massive addiction, which is just pain management. And then rather than be kind and help the people in pain, let's punish them for finding a way out. Like, you're so miserable, the only thing you want to do is numb out and escape on drugs. You're so miserable, you want to do that, or you do all these various things, or have anonymous sex and all this to just have a thrill that distracts you from how boring and miserable this life is. And then we're going to throw you in jail for that, you horrible person who had such a miserable life. We'll really teach you what misery is. We'll throw you in jail and then tax everyone else so they have to work harder to pay for your $80,000 jail thing. So this is miserable. It's a miserable life country. And then we're going to be all hypocritical if you do any deep looking at what we actually do as governments behind closed doors, whether it's reading Hillary's notes about this, or the Iran-Contra affair, or Vietnam, or what we did in Indonesia, and the lies. Like, I have an interpreter friend who interpreted for Bush Sr. He's right there interpreting Bush bullying the Indonesians into doing this or that for some political reason. And then he hears on the news that Bush never said any of that. He says, yes, he did. I was right there interpreting. And what's their response? Not owning up on the lie of our government, which is very common around the world. He's just forced, because he's one of the few Indonesian experts who can speak the language. They won't hire him again as an interpreter since he blew the whistle, unless he signs this bulletproof contract that says he will never disclose the actual truth, which he refuses to sign. So he's just not a presidential interpreter anymore. So that's our highest, and so that's from his he interpreted for Clinton and Bush. His experience was not much different. So there's lies, There's bullying of other countries. Then there's this extraordinary amount of money going to military efforts when the same amount of money could be used to help people in America live better lives. And then gear up to military stuff if it's really necessary. We're the only superpower at the moment. But let's have Trump rebuild the military like it's never been before. $1 trillion a year, which is enough. If you do the math, $1 trillion divided by all Americans, I think it works out to like $8,000 a year. Wouldn't you all like $8,000 to improve your well-being, eat organic food, learn emotional intelligence, take a holiday? No. We'll rebuild the military and terrorize more countries around the world and then lie about it. And then fire presidential interpreters if they blow the whistle. This is not very fun. It's not very noble. If you look at what the CIA, did with the drug war in terms of massive amounts of evidence showing the CIA raised money selling cocaine in American markets to fund various terrorist organizations. And then we're going to fight, and then we're going to spend massive amounts of more money fighting the terrorists that we formed. That's a joke. It takes a lot of rudeness and hurtfulness and lies and manipulating other countries before people get that angry at America. And we did that in our intelligence agencies and military and all that. We're very pushy and invasive into other people's space. And we won't tolerate anything in our space. So it's just not very fair. It's more like a bully. And we say we're doing this all in favor of democracy and this and that and the other. There's good parts of it. But there's also a lot of ugliness. There's a lot of our money being wasted hurting other people rather than helping Americans or the world become a more beautiful place. Just take the $8 trillion spent on Iraq and Afghanistan. And how about donating? $8 trillion could have cleared up poverty for the entire world and had the entire world thanking America for their dedicated devotion. And it could have paid all the personal debt of Americans. Or bought homes for all of our homeless. There's just so many things that are kind, simple, and basic human needs and rights that we could do rather than bullying the whole rest of the world and in the name of democracy. So it's just ugly. And our environmental abuse and our animal abuse is not very pretty or fun. The whole paradigm of that's the best we've been able to do because it's efficient. But so many of these things are not really justifiable. They have so many side effects that, by the time you've tested them on 100,000 animals you've murdered and this and that, the other, and then you get this new drug that has, anal leakage, occasional blindness, this, that, and the other, and then you look at the percentage of people it actually helps, and 1 in 34 people is helped by this drug, and it's proved and it's recommended because 1 in 34 people will have a great improvement, and the other 34 will have side effects, or the other 33 will have side effects and no improvement. Is that really optimum health? So there's just a lot of stuff to be depressed about. There's a lot of stuff to be depressed about. Now, ironically, many things are improving. It's like violence and overall down. There are many metrics that are improving. It's not an overall negative picture. In many cases, it's better than it's been. But it's disingenuous to say this is a great country and a great state of affairs and a great life. Why on earth would you be angry, sad, frustrated, tired, feeling despondent, feeling lonely, when you don't know anyone as you're doing your 80-hour week works other than people who are climbing the corporate ladder like you, and in a competitive environment there's very little loyalty to a human being. There's loyalty to advancement. For what? It's just not, it's not a very pretty picture. And the reason I'm saying this is I don't want you to feel bad that you feel bad, because that's what cultures do and societies do, to shift the focus from them over to you, and that's not fair. You, statistically speaking, would not feel bad living in a country where every single citizen was educated, cared for in proper health care, had a beautiful aging and dying process, had a warm bonded family and childhood process, where there was no child abuse, where there was no animal abuse, where there was no lies, where there wasn't corruption, where your vote and what made you happy actually shaped the policy of your community and your neighborhood, as opposed to some bureaucrat that you're paying lots of money to have you run from one permit department and one government office to another. Oh, that's not our department. Oh, sorry, you're going to have to wait 6 months for that. Oh, you're a week late on your due. Here's a 33% penalty. You were a week late. Well, we're 6 months late, but we're understaffed. You've got to understand, we're the government. We're understaffed. How about a penalty? No. We're the government. We don't pay penalties. We just waste your time on your tax dollar. So, double standards, lack of courtesy. If I get tired driving in my own country on empty highways at 1 a.m. and pull over for a 20-minute nap, there's a good chance a cop is going to stop and say, move along now. You can't rest on your own highway. The Thais can. The Filipinos can. Why do I, with the least traffic because of all my tax dollars spent on all these roads, why can't I take a rest by the side of the road like the rest of the world? You can't do that. You're an American. You've paid me to patrol and burn up gas driving around, making sure that if you're tired and need a rest, you got to move along. I'm tired though. Well, I don't care about that. It's not my job to care about you and your feelings and your body. I care about regulations. And I don't care. I'm just doing my job. It's not pleasant. Then you get a theft and the same police officer, you can't get them to go after and do anything and find the criminal. They're just hired to harass you when you sleep on your own streets, or give you speeding tickets when, or it's like they become self-serving rather than really helping the population in many cases. Not all. There's a lot of really great things that we all know and we all praise and we all have told us endless amounts of time. And there's a lot of really crappy things that it's relatively taboo to just look at objectively and see. So I was driving an electric bicycle recently, had a speeding had a ticket for not having a motorcycle license for an electric bicycle. Got a $300 fine. Turned out the police officer was wrong. I didn't need a motorcycle for the electric bicycle. It took me 6 months to sort that out, and the officer was way too busy to return my call. He was busy giving tickets to other people who probably didn't need those tickets for the community. And the real issue is, if we were kinder to one another as human beings from childhood starting up, we wouldn't need to put 2% of our population in prison, because they wouldn't be so hostile towards one another, because there'd be kindness. And all that money could be spent being kind to one another, and we would start being intelligent on our own. It's only stressed out, angry, dissociated people who don't slow down when they're driving around children. And those are the very people we create with these manic job schedules, doing work we don't like, and being ripped off, and having high taxes to pay for the police to go patrolling them and make them seem like they're to blame, when it's the environment that's suppressing their natural humanity. Human beings want to be good. It's just when all their emotions are blocked and denied, when they're shamed, when they're bullied, when they're taxed, and when they really get that their government doesn't care about them. It cares about the laws that have supposedly been written for them, but it's just as often or not get in the way of them enjoying their happy life. It's just so many things like that. The education system is not very friendly to adolescents. You're going into puberty and all this stuff. There's all kinds of stuff like that. It's not friendly. Starting with how many minutes of the whole school system is spent actually learning things that you're going to practice every day in your life. Like, do they teach you to be a good cook? Do they teach you to be a good bookkeeper? Do they teach you to do sales so that you can start your business? Do they teach you to invest money? Do they teach you to have a good marriage? They teach you to discern and welcome and cultivate spiritual experiences of all kinds. Do they teach you to meditate? Do they teach you to build a house? Do they teach you to collaborate with your neighbors? Do they teach you to imagine and dream your own lifestyle? Do they teach you to lobby your own government? Do they teach you to turn your life into a piece of art? Now, these would all be really useful things if they were taught, and if they were taught well. But let's learn algebra. Let's learn civics. Let's learn football. Let's learn tons of other stuff. And let's learn it in a way that isn't terribly efficient, with a 30-to-1 ratio. And then rather than enjoy contributing to your community, let's separate you from the community. Like when I did my homeschool program and I wanted to learn creative writing, I wrote magazine articles that I really cared about, sent them into the editor of my local magazines. They were published. And I felt really motivated and great and learned English and writing really quickly. But if I'd been in school, I would have been writing papers I didn't want to write for a teacher who didn't want to read them, so that the teacher could criticize me and no one would ever see them. How motivating is that? It's not motivating. But do we say, well, this is a messed up system. Why aren't these children out contributing value to the community today, where they can see how important they are and learning skills that matter, and say, wait a minute, we don't need to learn this skill. What Mrs. Jones needs is a new chimney on her house. Let's learn brickwork and build her a chimney, and then feel proud that we helped a woman in our community while we're learning brickwork. No. That would be far too practical. Let's learn brickwork by constructing a school building, sitting in a classroom away from the world, not contribute anything, have the taxpayer pay for that, and then bring bricks in to build something that will have to be torn down, just to demonstrate how to build brickwork and make sure absolutely no value to the community was generated in the process. That there was a net negative because the tax dollars had to pay for those bricks to be carted into the school, built, and then pulled down again, because we can't leave those creations here. They're in the way. So there's lots of pull away from reality, spend money to create an artificial reality, waste time in that artificial reality, and thus supposedly prepare for reality. So that's not very encouraging. And the life emotionally that most high school students lead is absolute hell. That's not kind to send children into that environment. So this is depressing. It's depressing to work this hard as a parent and then hear how your child is being bullied, teased, lied to, cheated on, whatever, in a brutal high school environment, and have your tax dollars paying for it and be working so hard to send your kid to that school. That's depressing. So you're depressed? It's a depressing environment. The real question, I think, is how can we create and use all that we've learned today to create an entire new world for ourselves and together? How could we create a new neighborhood from scratch where people could walk to all the things they needed to go on beautiful walkways, and that people could learn by building it and build it more kindly, and families could be closer together without commutes, which statistically lower happiness. The longer your commute, the more miserable you will be statistically. So then, why not build jobs into the community and consciously design communities so that everyone in them has a job maintaining the community? Now you've got this beautiful ecology, and then make government on the level of that neighborhood based on what creates the most happiness and well-being for those people, and let other neighbors do the same thing, and just have a few common policies that a street will always be able to connect neighborhoods until we have flying vehicles. That seems like a nice way to bring things down to a human scale. And how about a commitment that anyone in our neighborhood who gets, too miserable, that we have a protocol for helping them, because it's nice to have happy neighbors rather than depressed, sad, miserable neighbors who are shaming themselves for being losers, as opposed to getting help and being winners and being happy and being our happy neighbors rather than our stressed and miserable neighbors. So this is the direction that I think many people would naturally be excited to start pivoting towards, because I'm excited to start pivoting towards this, and I'm starting to form a nonprofit happinessdata.org is the domain I've just registered, and the whole focus is on how to start reclaiming our power as groups and individuals to work together to create much more healing, comfortable, beautiful, low-stress environments, to explore healthy, meaningful relationships and being caring and kind to one another, because that's more fun than the culture and the reality we're creating. And when we consciously design for caring, loving, and creating value to one another, rather than getting ahead, maximizing the production and consumption of things, and not caring about anyone but ourselves, reality gets more fun. When it's more fun, it's not as depressing. When it's not as depressing, we don't get depressed. It's pretty basic. Thanks for watching, and